Insane educrat Arne Duncan doubles down on dumbing down American public schools and blames poor communication for the reason so many Americans despise his Frankenstein creation of Common Core. I think it's time to bring the figurative pitchforks and torches directly to Arnie's front door. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program on the airwebs that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Unfortunately, Katie is not with us again. There's a new remake of a Wonka movie, and they need Oompa Loompas. Today, we're talking about an Indiana high school where more than 1,000 students have dropped out to be homeschooled. Plus, a new study finds first Common Core high school graduates are the worst prepared for college in the last 15 years. But we start with our old friend, Obama's former Secretary of Education, Arne the Punk Duncan, who writes in his new memoir that he wish he had pushed harder on Common Core because nothing says Democrat politics like tripling down on failure. But before we get to that joyous news, let me take a couple of seconds and ask you a question. Can you feed yourself and your family if the worst happens, if there is a flood or a fire or a hurricane? If not, it's time to really build yourself an emergency food supply. We take care of so many other aspects preventatively of our family's care. You got to do this too. I trust the people at My Patriot Supply, and you really need to. Just a 2-week food kit gets you started, and it's a nice security blanket. This week, you save $70 off this kit when you visit preparewithduke.com. Preparewithduke.com. These kits include meals that will last up to 25 years. They're easy to prepare, they're very tasty, and they're especially delicious on a really, really empty stomach. 25 years in storage, and they are guaranteed to arrive at your house in just 2 days. Go to preparewithduke.com, preparewithduke.com right now, and save $70 on your family insurance policy. That's preparewithduke.com. All right, on to our first story. Yeah, this is staggering. The hubris, the unabashed arrogance of the people who are ruining this country, including Arne Duncan. Arne Duncan, you may remember, is the Secretary of Education under the Obama years, the guy who brought us Common Core, the guy without any really serious educational credentials, the guy who is an educrat, the guy who is a technocrat, the guy who believes that the purpose of education is not mastery of subject or preparing kids for college, but who believes that the purpose of American school systems, public schools, is to become a petri dish of social justice engineering. He's come out and said, I wish I had pushed harder. President Obama's Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, has published a memoir in which he says that he does not repent at all for commandeering the American public school system. Duncan says that the real problem was that we didn't communicate well enough with the American people. We didn't sit down and does it sound awfully Obamacare to you? Right? Remember how the Obamacare apologists have said, it's a wonderful idea. We just dropped the ball in communicating it. We just didn't really do a great PR job. Well, it's the same thing with the failed healthcare program and now the failed education program. They blame it on communication, which is a subtle code way of saying, you're too stupid to get it, America, right? We were very clear about what this was going to be. This is Common Core. This is higher standards. This is college and career ready. This is way better than what your schools have already had, without a single shred of evidence that was true. Without one demonstrable shred of evidence that any of that was true, that's how they communicated it to you. But you're not stupid. When Obama and his team told you if you like your doctor, you could keep your doctor, you know it wasn't true. When Obama's team told you that the Affordable Care Act was going to be affordable, you knew it wasn't going to be. So we have faith in the American people. When we saw what Common Core was, when we recognized that these untried, untested standards that had never been metricized, that had never been in any way, shape, or form utilized in this form before, we knew it was garbage, these huge comments. What gets me about this is you've got evidence now. Since the middle of Duncan's term through today, and we'll see in the next story, how much worse this has gotten. We've got a generation of kids now who, for the first time, high school kids who've gone 4 years under Common Core, who are the least prepared generation for college in the past 15 years. And for Arne Duncan to stand up and to boast that we didn't go far enough, we didn't push it hard enough, we didn't communicate better about it, is a shocking, shameful lie. If this were a fully functioning constitutional republic, people like Duncan would be held accountable for the crimes they have waged against American school children, appropriating American taxpayer dollars to bribe and bully states into accepting a program that had never been tested, that was almost guaranteed to fail, promoted by non-educators, people like Jeb Bush, for God's sake, and Bill Gates, who know nothing about education. This now is a bridge too far. When Arne Duncan writes his self-serving memoir, stands up and said, we didn't double down hard enough, it's time we push back against that. It's time we hold people like Arne Duncan. I mean, if you could have maybe it's like you have a war crimes commission at The Hague. Maybe we ought to have an American commission, a citizen-led American commission where you can try, or at least attempt to hold accountable these people who have destroyed American education, who have lowered our kids' educational standards, who have ruined our kids' educational preparation for their own lives and for their own families and for their own ability to raise money to take care of their families. There ought to be a way we can hold them accountable. And if we do, let's make Arne Duncan the first man in the dock. And as I just mentioned, the second story is proof that Arne Duncan is full of it. Arne Duncan, who's bragging about how he should have doubled down on Common Core. Well, now we have from Joy Pullman, also in the Federalist, a really interesting story. For the third time in a row since Common Core was fully phased in nationwide, United States student test scores on the nation's broadest and most respected test, the NAEP test, have dropped. Further, the graduating high school class of 2019, the first class to experience all 4 high school years fully under Common Core, is, quote, the worst prepared for college in 15 years. The National Assessment of Educational Progress is a federally mandated test given every other year in reading and mathematics. Sometimes they'll do other grades and subject areas as well. In the latest results released just last Wednesday, American students slid on almost every single measure of educational success. Reading was the worst hit, with both 4th and 8th graders losing ground compared to just the last year tested in 2017, which they had already, in 2017, lost on the previous 2 years. 8th graders also slid in math, although 4th graders improved by 1 point in math. And according to Betsy DeVos herself, right, the Secretary of Education under Donald Trump, quote, these results are frankly devastating, said U.S. Education Secretary DeVos. This country is in a student achievement crisis, and over the past decade, it has continued to worsen, especially for our most vulnerable students. That's one of the big lies of Common Core. We were told that not only was Common Core going to make everybody smarter, it was higher standards, it was going to make everybody more college and career ready, it was also somehow miraculously, with all that rigor and difficulty, it was also going to benefit the lowest performing schools, particularly inner city minority schools. Do you understand how that can't happen? Simply raising standards and making it more rigorous does not help the lowest performing kids. It actually makes it harder on them. And sure enough, as I was saying as early as 2012, this is not only going to not help minority kids, it's going to put them further behind, which is exactly what it's done. And so, problem I have with Betsy DeVos pointing out the obvious is, Betty, what are you going to do about it? With all due respect, Miss DeVos, you're the one who said when you took 6 months after you took the job that there was no longer Common Core in America. I don't see you, by the way, in your condemnation of this, Miss DeVos, calling out Common Core. You talk about the crisis, you talk about the achievement gap, but you will not acknowledge the problem. And I know why, because as we all know, Miss DeVos was a huge supporter of Common Core. She participated with Jeb Bush initially, way before this became all on our public radar. She participated with Jeb Bush on a committee to try to get Common Core pushed through. So she's not somebody who was ever really against it. And as you and I know, if you've watched this show even one time, you and I both know that Common Core didn't go away. It was just rebranded. This is how big government handles things that you don't like, America. If they want something, they'll give it to you. And then when you don't like it, they won't get rid of it. They'll rename it and pretend they got rid of it. And that's exactly what Betsy DeVos needs to own up to. The consequences we're seeing now for weak education standards in this country, weak performance, lack of literacy, inability to do math, what we're seeing now is the direct result. It's made much worse directly by Common Core. Common Core, you said Betsy DeVos doesn't exist. Common Core, you, Betsy DeVos, helped to, behind the scenes, push and get put into the states to begin with. You now have a position of power. You now admit that what we're doing in the public schools is a failure. Time to connect the failure to the program and then do your job and get rid of the program. And what are we seeing as fallout for all of these failed schools? We have two different things happening. We have one, smart moms and dads, concerned moms and dads, aware moms and dads pulling their kids out of the public schools, either for homeschooling or safe private schools. And we have, and this is the tremendous tragedy, another group of kids who know nothing, have learned nothing, have been frustrated by the complete meaninglessness of their school education, their public school education, who are now just vanishing from the system. They are dropping out. We have a story from Indiana where over 1,000 students over a number of years have just left the school. Now, the question is, where are they going? On paper, Muncie Central High School appears to be rising to the challenges of Indiana's changing economy. It's one of these schools that boasts about how successful they are. Other schools in Indiana point to Muncie as oh, we've really done a great job here. This is what success is. And yet, when you look at the actual numbers, it's not successful at all. As education becomes more essential for finding jobs, the Muncie Central High School posted a fake graduation rate of 94%. Sounds pretty good. Although, how can one of the most advanced countries in the history of the world not graduate 100% of its kids? But 94, that's a pretty good rate. But because of a loophole in state law, that figure hides the fact that more than 100 students in the last year who were expected to graduate just disappeared. They left school without diplomas. And now, how do we handle that? Some of those kids did get homeschooled, but many just stopped coming. They're dropouts. And because of this kink in the law, they don't have to be reported as dropouts. So you have this artificially high number of graduates and literally a vanishing population of kids. That group, that 100, though officially classified as leaving to homeschool. See, if they leave to homeschool, you don't have to report them as dropouts. You can say that they left the school to be homeschooled by their parents, but many of that 100, and over a course of a number of years, it's been 1,000 kids who vanished this way. And they have no real evidence that those kids are in serious homeschool programs. These kids may have just gone away, but they're counting them as homeschool so they don't have to report the reality of their failed education program. This group, officially classified as leaving home to homeschool rather than dropping out, likely includes struggling students who were not on track to graduate, and teens the school incorrectly categorized when they left for alternative education options, according to state and Muncie officials. Out of all high schools in the state, Muncie Central recorded the highest number of students in the class of 2018 leaving to homeschool. And why is this a problem? You should not be surprised by the perfidy of the public school system. You should not be surprised at all by the lying and the gerrymandering of the numbers and the playing fast and loose with the truth that the public schools get you. But what the kick in the pants is that what is the response from many in the Gary public school system? Well, we've got to make it harder and harder to homeschool to make sure this doesn't happen again. See the link here? School messes up, school fails to educate kids, school loses kids who lose interest. Blames it on homeschooling, right? And so the problem here is not that we're not doing our job in the public schools. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that these kids can leave the school and identify as homeschoolers, even if they're not homeschooling. So our response, let's crack down on what is allowed to happen in homeschooling. Let's make it harder for homeschool families to do their jobs, real, serious, legit homeschool families to do their constitutionally gifted job of homeschooling, right? Now, to fix this problem, we're not going to fix the Muncie schools. We're not going to have a better curriculum. We're not going to have better outreach to make sure our kids are getting what they need in the schools. No. We'll make it harder for you to identify as homeschoolers, and there's your solution. Isn't it funny? The more public schools fail, the more the solution is to crack down on homeschools. to do away with charter schools and voucher schools, to get rid of school choice. The best way to handle a failed public school system to the failed public schools is to eliminate any and all competition so every kid has to go to a failed school. And that'll do. If you like the show, please consider supporting it by signing up for our Patriot Club. Just $25 a month keeps us going. We greatly appreciate it. It is a charitable ministry we're doing here. And it gets you this limited edition tumbler. Does anybody know why they call it a tumbler? There's no tumbling going on. I don't understand it. Anyhow, you get that tumbler and you get this handy-dandy stress ball, all as part of your $25 a month donation. Visit drdukeshow.com to get started. Finally, I'd like to thank My Patriot Supply for sponsoring today's show. If you have a business, large or small, we'd really love to partner with you. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise. That's freedomproject.com/advertise to get started. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, and until next time, my friends, you stay educated.